Coming out, middle of the week, afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here. But what an amazing celebration today is all about. I'd like to welcome the new Orange County Kids on the Block, Soli Architectural Surfaces. We're so pleased to invite them into our neighborhood and host this fantastic event. My name is Shannon, and I am the local publisher here with Lux, Southern California. Next time you see our Lux cover, you will see Lux, Orange County, San Diego. So I want to welcome all of you here today and say thank you. Quick introductions. I'd like to introduce some of the important players of Lux here today. First, my sales directors locally, both Jenny and Elisa at the back of the room. They're tiny, so you might not see them. Next, Brooke McLaren, our local publisher in Los Angeles. There she is in the back. And I'd like to also welcome her LA team, both Jennifer, Lisa, our national sales director, and Amanda. They're both here today, so thank you for joining us. And really quickly, I'd like to ask Paige to introduce some of the Soli key players as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Paige Sigban. I'm the manager here at Soli Architectural Services, and I just wanted to introduce a few people on my team. I have Jane. Where's Jane? There's Jane. Jane's with me here in sales, and then Kristen. Kristen is in charge of our marketing and PR, and we also have Katie. Where's Katie? There she is, way in the back. Katie's here in this showroom, and who else? We have Chris. Anyways, and last but not least, we have Soli, the man himself. So that's us. Thank you.
So let's get this panel discussion started. Once again, Soli, thank you for hosting this fantastic event. Lux was very pleased to be partnered with you, so thank you. I'd like to introduce our official moderator for the afternoon, Miss Vanessa Cochavinas. Vanessa comes with us from over 20 years of industry experience. She has represented some of the top design publications in the industry. She has quite an amazing background, but right now, Vanessa is also, she's got a great company, Vanessa K Productions, which does produce both show houses, special events, and industry-related events like today. And so Vanessa, if you'd like to start your panel off, thank you so much for being our moderator.
Thank you so much for having me. Welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. A few thank yous, of course, to Soli. Congratulations on your new showroom. It is fantastic. I can't wait to take a close look around. Kristen as well from Soli, thank you for all your hard work in helping us put this together. I'd like to thank Brooke and Shannon from Lux Interiors and Design for asking me to moderate this panel, and of course I'd like to thank my esteemed panelists. I'll get to introducing them in just one moment, but we've got James Magny to my left. To his left we have Horst Knoppenhanger, and to his left Maurizio Oberfeld. So welcome to my panel. So today we will be exploring contemporary versus modern architecture in Southern California. Contemporary and modern are two words that are often used interchangeably. And we'd like to get to the bottom of that. That is not necessarily correct. There is a difference between the two. And honestly, at the beginning of my career, it actually took me a couple years to really fully understand the difference, or even I would say dare enough to ask the experts around me. You can certainly read extensively about it, but today we have the luxury of having three experts in the field. And what is so special about it is that we have them coming from different areas of expertise. We have an interior designer, we have an architect, and we have a real estate developer builder. So you're really going to learn about contemporary versus modern from the three, I would say, peers, or tiers, excuse me, of our industry. Modern, or modernism, is a style, namely from the mid-20th century. Contemporary is used to refer to architecture that is being built in the today or in the now. And that is really, in simple terms, the difference. I will let the panelists delve into that. There is, of course, some crossover, and we will be exploring all of that. But we hope on this panel to be able to not only simplify it for you, but also give you examples that will illustrate the difference. We will also be talking about the influence on today's market and its relevance in today's market, and how manufacturers, builders, architects, interior designers are reacting to that and are accommodating these styles today, as well as the influence of modernism. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my panel. James Magny, directly to my left, is to the world of interior design, as is Ralph Lauren and Tom Ford to fashion. He has been named as top 100 designers by Architectural Digest and has built an enviable reputation as the leading designer of sexy, elegant, and luxurious interior spaces. His signature is profoundly cinematic, exemplifying sinuous simplicity with strong, sophisticated, contemporary architectural backgrounds. It is not about decadence for decadence' sake, but rather a supremely elevated way of life for a Magny client. Whether an all-white, modern, beachfront pied-à-terre or a majestic 40,000 square foot European-style estate, Magny brings an ultimate expression of modern elegance, cinematic mastery, and his unmatched skills of graceful restraint to all. The daunting task of shopping in Italy, the UK, France, Spain, or the US is no challenge for Magny. His firm's impressive client list is a global collection with diverse projects in London, Paris, Mexico City, Saudi Arabia, New York, California, and way beyond. Please welcome James Magny. To his left, we have Horst Knoppenberger. Horst Architects was founded in 1990 by Horst and is based in Laguna Beach, California. The practice has evolved into a multidisciplinary group, producing work which bridges technology with cultural and environmental awareness. The approach to design affirms the possibility of fulfilling the rigorous requirements of the client while engaging in a spirited and robust dialogue with the site. Each project celebrates the unique aspect of program, client, and site to arrive at design solutions which are original and distinctive. They adhere to the principal ethos of modernism to strip away the extraneous and be somewhat reductive. This approach leads to a poetics of space characterized by the sculptural interplay of light, material, and form. Please welcome Horst. And last but certainly not least, all the way down to my left, is Maurizio Oberfeld. His firm, Maurizio Oberfeld's firm, Dugali Oberfeld, was founded in 1997 and is located in Bel Air. He has an extensive background in architecture and construction. Through his experience in real estate development, Maurizio has gained an extensive understanding of the financial aspect of construction, from bidding and budgeting to financing and cost control. Having been a client himself, Maurizio understands the needs and whims of a client, a key component complementing Dugali Oberfeld's mission to achieve a superior level of service to the client. Having graduated as a Bachelor of Architecture from USC has given Maurizio a very intense understanding of design and architecture, a trait which is invaluable to the client throughout the construction process. Please welcome Maurizio. I also want to note that all three of my panelists have been published in so many publications and so many times that I don't have time to go through them. But they certainly are esteemed panelists. They are all located in Southern California. And so please do stay in touch with them and speak with them afterwards. We will be having a Q&A, about 10 minutes worth, for any questions that you may have. We are more than happy to answer those. And of course, we'll be sticking around after the panel. So now, without further ado, let's get to the topic. All right, so I will have all three of the panelists answer this particular question in their eyes. James, what is the difference between contemporary and modern architecture?
Well, I think that you very succinctly defined it. I think that in terms of practical experience, you know, modernism and ism it's a doctrine, it's a way of thinking of something. So when you look up the word modern and you look up the word modernism, you're going to get a very different reaction. But modernism is just like Art Deco or Art Nouveau or Beaux-Arts. It's a style. And it happened in mid-1950s. You know, it started in the international style in the Bauhaus in Germany, and it worked its way into the United States. And it kind of had two different branches, with Frank Lloyd Wright going in one direction, you know, and more of an organic style. And then we saw more of an analytical approach with Louis Sullivan and Gropius and Neutra and all of that went in another direction. So I think that leads us up to then contemporary work, which is what we're doing today. Now, are we influenced by Art Deco in our modern work? Yeah. Are we influenced by Art Nouveau? Sure. Are we influenced by modernism in what we're doing today? Absolutely. So I think that's the distinction.
Where's?
Thank you. I do believe that there is a substantial difference between contemporary architecture and design and modern architecture and design. Contemporary, to me, has always been associated with sort of the moment, things that are, you know, sort of popular currently. Contemporary design, you know, on one beautiful side of it, it allows for inclusivity. It makes room for different influences to kind of creep into it, be they cultural influences, historic influences, aesthetic influences. It's very inclusive. So the substantial difference between contemporary and modern architecture design, and modernism, at least in my opinion, is it's iconic and it's timeless. It's very well defined and probably certainly isn't as inclusive as contemporary design. Modernism you know, typically speaks a language of, you know, open floor plans, steel, glass. You know, originally embraced the machine age, so there is a very substantial difference between the two.
I don't know that I can say much more than all you guys have said about the differences of the two. I'd like to kind of more be a rhetorical question as to, we know that modernism, which is the source of the word modern, and in my architecture school at least, we were forced to capitalize the M for modern because it is a style. It's a very defined style. And we know that contemporary is whatever we are building at the time. Today, what we built in the 70s and the 80s, whatever is of the time and of the moment is contemporary. The question is, to me, is modernism dead? What we're building today, is it contemporary or is it modern? And I believe that you will see in several of these slides that come up that there is definitely a very strong influence in today's world in much of what we do from what was the modernism style of really from the Bauhaus all the way through the 60s that we saw culminating in California for sure. We'll get to it with case study houses. But I believe that there's a lot of what we're building today that in my book is still part of the modernism movement. It's just, maybe let's call it a modern revival. And so I have a very hard time calling something that I believe has modern roots and simply calling it contemporary. And hopefully we'll see some slides I put together when we get to them, some slides of buildings that were built from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, paired up right next to a slide that is of a house built very recently. And I think you will see the similarities very, very strongly whenever they get here. Just pay attention to that. And I think that's the big question is, what are we doing today? How can we redefine what we're doing today into a style possibly that's a modern revival or modernism revisited or something like that? I think that's a very important question.
First, would you like to add to that as far as, how you're seeing modernism interpreted and or how it is affecting today's market?
Yeah. Personally, I've always been more drawn to modernism than I have been drawn to contemporary architecture and design. And what draws me to modernism, and the reason why I think it works very well within this region is, modernism, especially here in California, as it was introduced by, in my opinion, Rudolf Schindler and Richard Neutra, it was always about blurring those boundaries, between inside and outside space. Schindler and Neutra, coming from Austria, found themselves in this sort of beautiful, benign climate, and they saw the opportunities that they didn't have in Europe for integrating, the interior spaces of structures with the exterior space. So that aspect of modernism really has been, for me, been kind of a guiding light in terms of how, how to build along this coastline in this region.
James, how would you say that the lines of modernism, how do you interpret those, and in your work, how are those reflected, or how does the architecture and your interior design speak to each other?
As we've defined, with modern, it was a reactionary movement. It was a stripping of all of the decoration, all of the crown moldings, and all of the baseboards, and it was an expression of the structure, post and beam, the expression of steel and glass, expression of plumbing sometimes. I mean, it would be very raw at certain points of modernism. Today in our work, those of us who are doing modern contemporary work, or contemporary work influenced by modernism, it still has those same aspects in that they're very difficult to build, as Maurizio can attest. There's no margin for error with these kinds of buildings. There's no baseboard or crown to hide anything. The walls have to be flawless. It's a very disciplined type of style to build and to design in. I remember someone telling me, "Oh, sure, your rooms are easy. There's 8 outlets in a room," and it's all about editing. How do you write a story with 20 sentences instead of 200 sentences? So it's all about editing. And the leaders that Horst talked about from Europe were all about stripping everything down to the essence. And we talk about honesty and integrity, honesty of materials. So that's really how we take it from where the architectural point of view and bring it into the interior.
Maurizio, do you want to maybe give some examples of, as you said in your slideshow, some examples of modernism in California that really strike you and speak to you, and that should be spoken of on this particular topic?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to go back a little bit. The slides all.
Kristen, can you go back a little bit on the slides, please? Thanks so much.
So this is actually perfect first slide. This is case study 22, which is, many of you I'm sure have visited it. Pierre Koenig built this house, and I actually have the dates of some of these. He built it in 1960. You can see that this is the ultimate example of modernism, the post and beam, the glass, the use of creative space in the exteriors was a huge part, as Horst said it. It's a big part of this style is form follows function, which is the ultimate Louis Sullivan saying, and that was applied by Frank Lloyd Wright. And the way Frank Lloyd Wright called it, he said the house has to be, the project has to be one with the land. So for the first time, They really use the spaces of the location and the property and design to that. So a property that has a view, this is all about the view. It's all about the exterior spaces. It's about simplicity. It's about the linearity of it. It's about an open floor plan. It's about capturing the exterior space while you're in the interior space. I found this slide to be pretty incredible because when you go to the next slide, I showed this to a few people and they said, sure, that's case 22. And of course, this isn't. This is Hagi Bellsberg Skyline Residence, which was built just recently. And I thought it was pretty incredible how these two really are so similar. And I just found these a couple days ago, so I haven't had a chance to ask Hagi about it, but obviously he's influenced by it. And you can see that this is, when I'm talking about the modern revival, we're able to do the same things that are the core of modernism, but with better materials, with bigger glass, with bigger spans, with better structure, more cantilevers, different things like that. But I thought this was, as a first slide, pretty incredible. So this is, I'm sure a lot of you know, this is a Kaufman residence in Palm Springs built by Neutra. And this house was built in 1946. And it's a legendary house. It's been renovated by Marmel Radziner, and a lot of you have seen it in person. Many of you have seen it in photograph. And the influence of this was, excuse me, one of the most striking for me, because I never realized this, but if you go to the next slide, this is our own project, designed by Zoltan Pali. I never really knew it. Joe's laughing because when I saw this, I kind of was freaked out. This is sort of the reinterpretation of Neutra with the vertical fins, with a steel and glass, with a two-story on the left, one story on the right. It was pretty eerie to me to see this, but this is a house built in 2010. You know, almost 64 years later. We can go on this slideshow.
Actually, I want to interrupt you for just a moment, because what I'd like to do is I would like to talk about, because you touched on this, the difference in materials. While the materials are still very much rooted the same, we have metal, we have glass, how has you know, today's technology affected those materials, if at all, and how do they react, let's say, to our environment? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it exactly the same? Horst, do you maybe want to address that?
It's a very, very interesting question. You know, there's always something very honest about modernism, and if anything, technology has enabled us to hone in on those details, the way pieces come together. You know, we call that joinery sometimes, or the spans. You know, as Mauricio was showing these slides and very eloquently describing, you know, what this architecture means to him, there's an aspect of this which is very emotional. You know, the idea of being suspended above the cityscape. You know, that technology can actually provide, you know, us with the tools, the science, the materials, the technology, the durability to actually, you know, do what Pierre Koenig did and you know, let this house kind of hang very dramatically over the hillside. So there has always been this beautiful synergy between technology and you know, modernism, which I really appreciated. In so many other types of architecture, like let's say more classical architecture, historical architecture, so many of what we see in modernism exposed and honest kind of gets covered up in some of those more traditional forms of architecture. So I love this dance between architecture and technology. And you know, technology has been changing, but I think more in terms of sustainability. Like, how do we create buildings which are not only beautiful, but are also responsible in terms of, you know, the resources that they use and that they're sustainable? Because who wouldn't want to see, you know, a Pierre Koenig building 200 years from now? Because it will be timeless, it will be iconic, it will be like Saarinen and, you know, so many of the others. So technology brings forth that possibility.
James, would you like to also address that as far as how technology has affected the work that you're doing, if at all, or if it's still, natural products are still just number one and aren't necessarily affected by technology or the processes that we have today?
For our group, technology, the thing that has impacted our spaces the most has probably been things like, for example, home automation systems. We just naturally, when we see a seamless, clean space, we have now grown so far with home automation to where devices on the wall, iPads or some such devices, are controlling all aspects of a house. And people want to be able to control their house from all areas. We were doing a photo shoot in Santa Barbara a few days ago, and my clients in Manhattan sent me pictures of us shooting the house, which I didn't know we had cameras in every room. So that freaked me out a little bit, but it really drilled into my head, and our team sits down and have these educational classes where we're learning cutting-edge technology, because people are expecting more and more of that, particularly the younger generation. They want be able to control their houses that way. And similarly, things like glass and metal, they're not the same glass and metal. They look the same, but they have advanced in many ways so that we are more responsibly environmentally. I think in terms of classic materials, stones, we're in a beautiful stone showroom now, those things haven't been affected much. Those will always be classic and timeless. How we might use them is different.
So I guess that would bring us to today. I think we've, what are you seeing today? What different facets in buildings are you seeing today, Boris, maybe you want to take this, that were directly influenced by modernism but have been brought up to a more contemporary standard or aesthetic?
Well, I started the presentation off by mentioning I'm a huge fan of modernism, and I am, but I also love certain things about contemporary architecture, and what I do love about it is the inclusivity, that, we are sort of a culture of so many diverse people, and where we're building and designing homes. In a perfect world, like each of those homes would represent the unique aspect of the site, client, the culture, and the history. And that's something that I think contemporary architecture and design bends better toward it, because it is by nature inclusive. Well, actually, I might just back up a little bit. One of the detriments, maybe one of the shortcomings of modern architecture, especially like in the mid-century, was that architects were designing the same buildings often in America that they were designing in other countries. So there was this kind of absence of acknowledging the idiosyncratic aspect of culture and history and time and place and all those things that contemporary art and design embraces. We've learned, as architects, not all of us, but we've learned to be contextual. We've learned to design architecture to speak to those different aspects of the site, and I think that's been one of the biggest sort of benefits to contemporary design architecture.
Mauricio, do you want to take that one as well, and maybe comment on what you're seeing today that may or may not have been influenced by modernism, but what are we seeing in today's contemporary market?
Well, I think what we're seeing is a real desire to recreate what was created years ago in today's standards. What does that mean in today's standards? We're not taller today than we were, but we have bigger glass. We are definitely not, even though there is global heating, it isn't to the degree that homes are now much hotter, but we do have much better protection from the elements. One of the things a lot of people don't talk about these houses, of the modern era, is that they definitely were not necessarily the most comfortable to be in. I think that there are some people that have walked through some of these, and you can't really be inside very long, and that's why they had the sliders and the big open area and get breezes through. And today we're able to achieve these new things with better technology because we have glass that is dual glazed and high performance and triple glazed, and we continue to push the envelope, asking companies, for the most part in Germany and Austria and Switzerland, with bigger glass, taller glass, as much as we can, in order to be able to get this transparency that we see in these other buildings, but in the scale that we're used to today. People want tall ceilings, people want big open spaces. Same concepts, still same open floor plan, still same linearity, but with better materials. And it ties right back into your prior question of technology, because the roofing materials we can use today are much better, because the concrete materials that we use today can span a lot further, because the steel that we use today is much more accessible. We continue to dial this down to make these buildings be at the scale and the richness that we're used to today. Think about for a minute that the modernism style, like we've said now quite a bit, was a reaction to the times. This is, for the most part, post-depression, during the war. Resources weren't the same. It was a fight against luxury, and the case study houses are a perfect example of the desire to build something that is technologically advanced at a lower price, and these houses were built for very little money at the time, but beautiful and with a new expression that didn't exist. We're trying to take that and say, let's kick it up a notch. Let's make the same beauty, but why not put in more details, make these more luxurious? And we have the ability to do that by the sheer expansion of the technology that's available to us today in every sense of the word of what makes these houses, which is really mostly concrete, glass, and steel. And I think that's a huge advantage for us to be able to recreate these styles today in a luxury and in the scale that we feel comfortable living today. And with the by luxury, I don't just mean the materials that we buy at Soli. I mean luxury also by the fact that we're here in a beautiful modern building, but we're nice and cool. We have we enjoy luxury in every sense of the word in the same pristine building that we're copying and we're emulating from the past.
James, do you want to touch on that as well? Really, what are you seeing in today's contemporary market?
I think there's a lot of various things going on with contemporary. You know, we compare Frank Gehry's work to, say, Richard Meyer's work, and you know, some say that the Getty is sort of the high culmination of the 20th century, and Frank Gehry's Disney Hall is the beginning of the 21st century. So using that as sort of a benchmark, we see more whimsical, organic forms, similar to what Frank Lloyd Wright was doing in his version. And contemporary work now, as Horst is saying, when we talk about inclusive, there are lots of great architects doing great things that are very different from modernism. Was very strict, very rigid, very mathematical, very analytical. Today we're making them much more luxurious, largely by the materials and the details that we have developed. But with contemporary specifically, I think we're doing some wonderful. Maurizio and I have a client and a friend who did a museum in Mexico City that is very cutting edge, very beautiful, very new. We look at Zaha Hadid's work. You know, is that contemporary? Is that modern? Or is that just, you know, brilliant? So those are the kinds of things that I look at and study when I'm at home to say, where are we going? You know, we know what modernism gave us. It was a gift. And now where are we going from that point?
I think that's a very interesting point, and maybe Maurizio, you'd like to comment on that as well. Where are we going? What's next?
Well, you know, by the sheer definition, what's next is more contemporary. So I think somebody needs to write something smart and Lux magazine and maybe create a new style. But I completely agree with everything Jim said. We're headed into a very exciting era where we are not limited by anything. We've always been limited, if you look at the 19th century, by the materials that we had at the time, which were very, very heavy. And we're limited in the 20th century by the materials we had, which were very light. And now we're not limited. We see every day all kinds of materials that come up that allow a Frank Gehry to express architecture that we've never dreamed of. That we see a Calatrava be able to build bridges and airports that you couldn't fathom. I just saw the design for the airport in Mexico City being designed by Sir Norman Foster. And it is unbelievable. I don't think I could have imagined that was possible 5 years ago. So whatever is in your imagination, we are seeing it develop before our very eyes. I'm very lucky to be involved in a project with a very respectable firm from Austria, Bumschlager Everly, and they came up with an idea for residential design that the entire exterior of the house is completely clad in a fabric. So where we've thought we've seen it all, where we have stucco, and we have cement board panels, and we have wood, and we have glass and steel, and on, we're not going to be building a house out of fabric, you know. And this is very exciting to me. You can backlit the fabric. The house can actually be a sculptural element. So what's next is something I don't know, but I know it's going to be very, very exciting.
Bruce, do you want to comment on that as well, in your vision?
Yeah, I would love to. You know, what really gets me excited about where we are right now is once again, the inclusivity of contemporary design, you know, including other cultures. Our family, we went to Morocco a couple of years ago, and as a modern architect, I always thought, you know, really in terms of walls that are either solid or transparent. In Moroccan culture, they have walls that are porous. They think in terms of porosity, and this whole idea of porosity has sort of led to a lot of new building products. So, you know, once again, you know, within the umbrella of contemporary, within the umbrella of modern, and even looking around the showroom, I see these beautiful Murano glass samples that are they're iconic and timeless in Italy. They've been used, you know, for historic buildings forever. Now we see them sort of recontextualized into something that I'm sure Jim will be putting into some of his modern houses pretty soon, because they're gorgeous materials, and so it's the assimilation of culture, it's the inclusivity of contemporary architecture, as Maurizio says, that will keep it fresh and will keep it exciting.
I think I am going to wrap it up at this point. I don't want to inundate you with too much information. I hope that we have made a distinction for you, both through words and images. I would love to take some questions. We have plenty of time for questions. If you would like, raise your hand. Not one? Well, we did our job. Oh, Soli. What's the difference between modern and postmodernist? Is that right?
That's an interesting one, if I may take it.
Look at you perk up.
Because when postmodernism happened, I'm old enough to have lived through that 80s era. But you know, at Torre Sostas, well, let me make it easier. If we look at things like Frank Gehry's Binocular buildings, and we look at the Pacific Design Center by Cesar Pelli, we all know that building. Postmodernism got a really bad rap. It was a trendy, colorful, garish movement, but it was a reaction again against modernism, the rigidity of modernism, and it was this artistic, overflowing artistic movement, full of bright color and shapes. And you know, after Graves and Philip Johnson's AT&T building, I believe it is, you know, after that occurred, it fell out of favor, and it became poo-pooed by a lot of people. But I think what's interesting is where we are now is we're kind of revisiting again in a postmodernist fashion all new ideas again, where we're using materials in perhaps it's a more decorative way, or perhaps it's in a more whimsical way. That's where we often just look at the Disney Hall. It's certainly a whimsical building. So I think there's kind of a resurgence. We're just not calling it postmodernism, and we're looking at it differently.
And either of you like to comment on that as well?
No, I think it's very interesting, what Jim just said. And as I was listening to what he said, I realized that the difference when postmodernism, and I'm also very close in age with Jim, so I remember those times. Postmodernism had more of an interest in the forms of architecture, and those forms are the ones that we got sort of tired of, very quickly. But this new resurgence is more about abstraction. It's about a less of a literal sort of an appreciation and an interpretation. It's these beautiful mosaic tiles that we see in the showrooms, the glass tiles I was mentioning earlier, the idea of porosity. So we're looking at history, we're looking at culture, but we're not limited to just the formal aspects of it. We're limited to those emotional, essential aspects. So I think that says a lot about where we are.
Any other questions? Don't be shy. Okay, well, I want to thank our panel once again, James, Horst, and Mauricio. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your busy days. And of course, thank you to Soli for being our host this afternoon, and congratulations on your new showroom. So I think now we have some little bites and libations. Please feel free to stay, mingle, enjoy, and thanks again.